My grandmother had a sister that had to ride a log all the way out. And she ended up by the Gibbstown Bridge, Intercoastal, and Jesse Gibbs, he lived down here too. And he was under a roof over there, and he saw my aunt
on the tree trunk, floating, and
so he went and got her and brought her over. Yeah.
So he saved her, could have, and so he brought her into his house.
Well, it wasn't a house; it was just a rooftop that he was under.
So, but they made it.
Yes, they made it.
Hello, everyone. This is Charles McNeely from Dev Doc Theater, and I am so happy, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be here in this lovely home with Mrs. Judy Guidry, who lives in Sulphur now, but grew up in Cameron. Judy, it is so nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me and sharing your story of Hurricane Audrey. I know it's been a while, but let's go ahead. You know, this is, the information can be, you know, learned. I'm a teacher, so I'm all about, you know, helping people understand the misunderstood, and just, you know, any information that you have on that event would be helpful, I think, for years to come and generations to come. So to begin with, how old were you on June 27th, 1957?
13 years old.
13. Just became a teenager. Yeah. The world was in front of you. I remember when I turned 13, everything was wide open. And where in Cameron Parish did you live?
I lived in Creole with my grandparents.
Okay, so Creole is kind of in the center of the parish. You have Cameron and Holly Beach and Johnson Bayou to the west, and then Grand Chenier, Little Chenier, Oak Grove, I think is south, but to the east. So Creole is pretty much right in the middle of that parish. What do you remember growing up before Audrey in Creole? What's any memories of that?
Well, went to school at we started school at Creole High School, okay, because South Cameron wasn't built yet. Then that's where we rode buses. I mean, right next to the school was a little store. Okay. And we could bring money to school. We could go at recess, go buy candy or chips or whatever we wanted. That's good. And this lady that owned the store, I don't know if you've heard of her son is a judge, Judge Savoy.
I have heard of Judge Savoy. Yeah, yes.
He goes to church with us.
That's what church is he going to now? St. Teresa's, right over here in Lake Charles, or in Sulphur. In Sulphur. That's wonderful. Well, good. So you had Creole High School that you were attending. Did you attend Creole High School the entire time, or was South Cameron built?
Hurricane Audrey came, and then some of us after Audrey went to school in Big Lake.
That's right, because nothing was happening in Lower Cameron Parish, and so in Grand Lake, I guess you call it, Big Lake or Grand Lake, North Cameron Parish. How long were you away? How long did you go to?
1 year.
Okay. So
I had moved. My aunt and uncle bought a house in Lake Charles, and so I lived with them. And I had an uncle, my godfather. He was a carpenter, so he'd drive to Creole
every day.
Yeah, so sometimes I get a ride with him.
Nice. And
he'd drop me off at school, and other times I rode with Mr. Hebert. Gotcha. He was a teacher at Creole High School. I mean, at South Cameron.
South Cameron. Yeah. What did he teach?
Business administration.
Nice. Oh goodness, that's wonderful. So yeah, that's a little bit about, you know, what you were doing a little bit before and after. Who are your parents? What were their names?
Okay, Bud and Lorena Trahan.
Bud?
My daddy's name was Henry Gray.
Okay.
But everybody called him Bud. Bud worked for the Gray estate.
The Gray, the Matilda Gray.
Right.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yes. And
what did he do there?
A rancher. He helped work cattle with him. His daddy and mama lived in the Gray house, the Gray estate house.
Okay.
And
That
my
was in
mom,
Lake Charles, wasn't it?
no,
Oh, that,
it was on Johnson Bayou,
gotcha.
next to the, just east of the schoolhouse.
Okay.
That big white 2-story house, just,
Okay.
and, but my mama was in Creole because my grandfather, her dad, was sick. He was on oxygen.
Yes.
And they had called the family together because he wasn't supposed to make it.
Okay.
And we had a lot of company the night before the hurricane would come and go.
Sure.
And so my mom was there to be with
So
her
she was
dad.
there to be with her dad, and he wasn't doing well, and this was the hurricane was coming.
Yes.
Goodness.
And we lived, I mean, this house here was an old house.
Okay.
It was just,
One story, two.
yeah, oh, one story,
okay.
yeah.
So your mom's there with your dad.
Yeah, my dad was on with my grandfather,
Okay.
and my dad was on Johnson Bayou.
Okay. Gotcha.
They weren't getting a lot, so he decided, the water was coming up, so he decided, my dad did, he was going to go to his parents, stay with his parents at the 2-story house.
Okay.
But when he got to the school, the water was getting higher, and he was afraid his horse would maybe walk in a hole or something and flip. And so he got on the schoolhouse porch with the horse and took a nap.
While the water's coming up, he just.
Well, it didn't get as high over there.
Oh gosh. Okay. All right.
You know, it was knee deep, I guess.
Yes. Okay.
And but my grandfather, while we were on top of we ended up on top of the clinic, and my grandfather told my mama, he said, "What do you think Bud's doing right now?" She said, "Well, if it's like here, over there, he's dead. He drowned." But he didn't know what we were going through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because that is a good distance, and the way hurricanes work, there's only a part of it
Right.
that is the most powerful, and if you're lucky enough to be on another part, the surge isn't as great, the winds aren't quite as strong, and so luckily for him, he was able to nap a little bit.
And so anyway,
Now you mentioned y'all were up on the roof of the clinic. Now how did that happen? Y'all got to the clinic. Do you remember what was that like?
well, I don't remember getting there from the house, but I guess my aunt must have called Dr. Carter, and he gave us permission to go there because my grandfather's house was very poorly made. But anyway, we got there, and somebody said you could see the water rolling in. So we went, me and my grandmother went to the back door and looked, and sure enough, you could see the water just rolling. It was like a wave just rolling in.
Absolutely.
And I mean, it didn't come that way. It just came rolling.
It was, yes. It wasn't a wave.
No.
It was more like, well, yes. It was like, I don't know how to describe it except it was filling you. You were the land was disappearing.
Right.
Basically,
Yeah.
yes. Okay. And so you saw that, and y'all were on the floor. Y'all were on the ground floor.
We were inside the clinic at that time, and we had some other people drop by, and ended up with 27 of us there.
In the clinic of Dr. Carter's
Right.
in Creole,
Yeah.
basically. Okay, and so water's coming up. You got 27, you said? 27 people.
Well, meanwhile, the water is coming up. It's going up and I remember hanging on to the window in the front, and my grandmother.
Hanging on to the window was open,
Yeah.
and so you were hanging
I
on.
think somebody must have suggested that we leave the back door open.
Ah, the water goes through, exactly. It wouldn't push the building. That's good.
So, but I remember my grandmother sort of going under, and I wanted to catch her, you know, because the water was deep in the house. And somebody said, we better do something different, because if we in this building, with the water keep going up, we're going to drown in this building. So they suggested we get on top of the building. And my uncle was a tall man, and I remember him being at the door. And then
The front door or the back door?
front door. And he would get us up and then two guys. I remember two guys on top of the roof. They were already up there. Yeah, they were younger.
Okay.
Than the older people.
So your tall uncle was at the doorway, and you had two young men on the roof, and so your uncle lifted everyone.
I'm sure he had help.
Right, okay.
But I remember him being there. He's the one that lifted me up, and the two guys
grabbed you and brought you up there. When you got up there, do you remember, were you the first one up there?
Oh, no.
There were other people up there. What about your grandfather who was sick? Do you remember how he was brought up?
I don't remember how he was brought up.
But he got up there. Okay. They must have been very gentle and took care.
No. He had gotten the last rites. The priest had been there the night before, and they brought him, put him in bed. And I remember him, he was up there with us. Right. And I remember Mr. Terrio had brought a sack of crawfish or something at the house the night before. And I remember my grandfather saying, boy, if we had them he said it in French, yes. Boy, if we had that sack of crawfish up here, it would be good.
He was joking. He'd been given last rites, and he was joking about boy, would we have a crawfish boil with Audrey? That would be something nice. Now, you said Mr. Terrio had brought the sack of crawfish. Which Mr. Terrio was that?
That was Alfred Terrio, but his name, they call him Jumbo.
Jumbo, okay. Alfred, all right. Thank you. I wanted to make sure that, because I know there's a lot of Terrios and many.
And one of the boys that was there was his son.
Okay, all right. That was helping people up on the roof? All right. So y'all were up on the roof, and do you remember the wind or the rain?
The rain was pelting down on us, and it was cold.
Really? Okay. June, but still, you're wet and the wind is blowing.
So somebody suggested somebody go down there and get the drapes off the windows. And so somebody went and got the drapes out of the window, and they brought it back, and the ones that were sitting in front and by the air conditioning units, they put it in the back, and leaned against the...
Yes. And made a canopy, I guess. Yes. And people were able to
you'd still feel water, but it wasn't
as bad. Yeah. Okay. That's ingenuity right there. That's very nice to think about.
So then we stayed up there, but Mr. Carter, Harold Carter, had a Chevrolet place.
Now this wasn't the Dr. Carter.
It's same family.
Same family. Okay. All right.
But it was his uncle that had the Carter, the Chevrolet place. Okay. And we could see the water going up. And somebody said, look, I think the water's coming down, because it was kind of getting lower on that building across the way.
Was the wind, do you remember if the wind was still blowing whenever y'all saw the water going down? Still blowing, still raining, but you noticed that the water line that's progress. That's hope.
Yeah, and then later that evening, when the water did go down, wasn't all gone, but they sent Mr. Oliver LeBeau. He lived across the road from the drive from Dr. Carter's house, and they sent him down there to get us to come to the old Dr. Carter's house that night.
Okay. How big was Dr. Carter's house? Was it a 2-story? Okay. All right. And that's the Dr. Carter's house in Creole that's still there today? Is that?
Yes. When you turn to go towards Cameron, there's a big off the road. Yes. There's a 2-story house. You can see it back there.
Gotcha. So when you get to Creole, you turn right to Cameron, and that house that you stayed in.
Further back.
Okay, it's off the road, but you can see it from the road. Okay. I want to make sure of landmarks and where these things are now, and so. All right. So you notice the water going down at the Chevrolet place, and it started to slow down. Do you remember that? And
there was a cow that came in the clinic with us while we were in the clinic. A cow, and the guys, they took it and they headed it out towards the front of the door to go out, because we could see things going by, cows, horses, whatever.
Yeah, it got pretty deep, and the current was very strong. So All right. So you went through it up there. Everybody on the roof was good. Everybody was okay.
Yeah. The little baby, there was a baby, I think he was 8 months old. I heard they made a remark, his lips are turning blue, so they put him under their shirt to have the body heat. Yes.
And he survived. Wonderful. So everybody, all 27 of you, up on the roof, a flat roof, in a hurricane, all good. And so, do you remember how you were rescued, or what happened after the water went down?
Okay. Well, there was a boat. They came to Creole, and I might have been a helicopter too. I had to be picked up.
Gotcha. And that was in Creole?
Yeah.
You were picked up there.
And they brought to the Gippstown Bridge because it was a ferry.
Like a ferry.
Yes. So they met us there and brought us to Lake Charles. Yes, we ended up in Lake Charles, and later on, I went with my mom and daddy. Evidently, my daddy found my mama some kind of way.
And he was just fine with the horse on the porch, and but y'all found each other, and okay.
And I ended up going with them, and we stayed in Sulphur, here in Sulphur, south of here, at Mr. A.J. West's house.
Who? A.J. West, W-E-S-T. All right. How did y'all know him, or did you know him?
Cattle. I mean, he.
Cattleman. Okay. Yeah, that's a huge industry. Still is in Cameron. Were y'all taken directly to Mr. West's house, or were you taken?
All I know is I ended up at Mr. A.J. West because he was a conniver. He was connive.
I've heard that name, yes, and sometimes it's good to have somebody like that.
Like I was cleaning, I was helping Miss Grace wash dishes, and then somebody knocked on the back door. She said, "Would you mind seeing who's at the back door?" And I did, and it was Mr. West with that gorilla face on.
Just trying to bring some joy, I guess, or something. That's funny, a prankster. That's so good, and that's helpful too. Sometimes, whenever you're in a difficult situation. So, well, good. Well, so after that, you're here at Mr. West, AJ West, and you said you were away from home for about a year. Is that right? Or?
Yeah, I ended up. My aunt and uncle bought a house in Lake Charles on Bienville Street by McNeese. It's next.
Absolutely, yes.
And so I lived with them, and like I said, I would go back and forth to school with Luke or Mr. Hebert.
Yes.
And then the next year, South Cameron was open, and we moved over there.
Very nice. And where did you move to the same place?
No, South Cameron is east. North in Creole.
Yes, it's more like Oak Grove, Creole, and by Grand Chenier. Yeah. So where did you move to after Audrey? Was it
I went back to my grandfather's. We lived in a tent. The tent, the bottom was wood, and they put a canvas on top.
Oh my goodness! Where was this?
No, it was in Creole. Yeah, where the house was, they put a tent up.
Got you. Okay.
Until finally the house was built.
Got you. So you literally camped out in a tent, excuse me, for a little while, and at 13, 14 years old.
Well, I mean, by the time I got there, the tent business was about finished.
Okay, got you.
Because I lived for a year with my aunt and uncle.
Right, yeah. But you did stay in the tent for a little while. Yeah. Okay. And I've never heard of that. You're the first person to tell me they had tents, wooden with a canopy.
It was, I guess the wood, it was off the ground.
Sure.
And then they had the wooden slats.
Right. The sides and the walls.
The canvas was
Canvas canopy on the top. Okay. Now, your grandfather, you said he received last rites the night before Audrey. How long did he live after Audrey?
1963.
So 6 years.
Yeah. In fact, he got a plaque from President Kennedy.
Now that is very special.
They died the same month.
Really, in November of '63. Why did he get a plaque?
He was in World War II. He was one of the angels that rode the horseback on the Gulf.
Yes. Amazing. Oh my goodness.
And the plaque went with the Hurricane. Audrey got the plaque.
Yes.
So, but I remember seeing that plaque.
Well, I'm glad he had another 6 years after Audrey. I guess that's kind of kick-started his energy.
In fact, he was driving cattle.
After Audrey?
A few weeks,
Amazing.
a few months after that. In fact, Dr. Carter passed him by and he said, "What are you doing up there?"
I love that. That's such a great, strong human spirit, and I'm getting a lot of that in these stories. So very nice. So, Judy, after all of this that you've been through, what was the biggest lesson, or what was the biggest thing that you took from having that experience? Could you be able to share what
Avoid hurricanes.
Do you evacuate now from? Yeah, that's pretty much everybody I've talked to. It's that they don't want to mess with anything like that, and so well, good. Well, is there anything else that you want to say about Audrey or about Cameron Parish at that time that we haven't talked?
I mean, we were fortunate that we had a place that stayed, because my grandmother had a sister that had to ride a log all the way out, and she ended up by the Gibbstown Bridge, intercoastal, and Jesse Gibbs, he lived down here too, and he was under a roof over there, and he saw my aunt
on the tree trunk, floating, and
so he went and got her and brought her over. Yeah.
So he saved her.
Yeah.
So he brought her into his house.
Well, it wasn't a house; it was just a rooftop that he was under.
Got you. Okay. So, but they made it.
Yes, they made it. But her husband, Uncle Willie, he didn't. He drowned in hurricane.
Yeah, they say the numbers could be anywhere from 430 to over 500. I think we'll never know, but...
yeah, how many of them didn't survive that got washed back out?
Out to the Gulf, in the marsh. I mean, I know they looked around, but there's so much space there that... there's also stories like this where, for whatever reason, y'all did okay. And
I mean, it would have been simple for us when we got to Creole just to head north.
Right.
But we didn't. We stayed at the clinic. I was just aware of the little bit surroundings that I had up there, because I was sick that night.
Really?
I was sick.
You were throwing up. Okay.
I don't know if it was seasickness or what.
Okay. Stress.
Maybe so. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, you still remembered a lot for not feeling well. And so, Judy, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Well, no problem. If there's anything else while I'm working on this, I'll let you know, and I want to make sure that it's your video, that it says everything you want it to say. So we'll make sure of that. But thank you very much for that. And everyone, I hope you enjoyed that story, Mrs. Judy Guidry, and to be continued, the stories of Hurricane Audrey by Dev Doc Theater. Thank y'all so much for listening. Take care.